Hey guys, what the heck is going on? Sam Cox here with Team Ropire and coming to you guys today with another deck profile for GOAT format. Now today we're going to be showcasing the Pixie Control deck that I love. I love this deck so much. I've been playing this deck for a very long time, probably since I'd say 2015 or 2016 was the first time I put this deck together. Whenever I first got into GOAT format, Tyler and I were looking through bulk, which is a very common thing that you can find us doing on a lot of weekends, and I found this card and I was like, man, this is a really cool card and we should try to incorporate it. So it took me a couple weeks, but I ended up finishing the first build, I don't know, 7 years ago, maybe a long time ago, and since then this deck has changed a lot. This is an updated profile. I thought it was about time to just get a modern day profile of what I do play. Now you might find other deck profiles online from me or from other people, but this is what I play currently, and I do play it a lot with friends. I play it a lot on Dueling Book Rated and stuff like that, in the competitive circuits, so to speak. I haven't taken it to like a big tournament yet, but I will say that a couple years ago I did go to a GOAT format tournament, and somebody brought Pixie Control, and I was like, hell yeah, and they ended up getting top 4. So that was a really cool moment, and it's kind of like seeing one of your kids do something really cool. But yeah, if you're looking for a competitive deck and you're looking to get into GOAT format maybe, or you're looking to just kind of change up stuff a little bit and still play something pretty competitive, and you're looking for something with the chaos aspect, but it's a little bit different and it can kind of throw your opponent off guard, this is the deck for you, friends. Now I will say before we get started, there's a few links below that I would love for you guys to check out. One is my band's music. My band is called Raglan, and checking out the music is absolutely free. That would just make my day if you guys went and checked it out. Also, there's a link to Raglan's Patreon, and this channel specifically doesn't have a Patreon, but by supporting that Patreon for Raglan, you are directly supporting this channel, because the band is consisted of my wife and I, and all the money from everything, including Patreon, just goes to the same place. So without any further ado, let's get into this. Now, the first card right here is Pixie Knight, and I'm going to do the best I can to explain this card to you guys. So what it does is, when this card is sent to the graveyard as a result of battle, your opponent selects one spell card from your graveyard and places that card on top of the deck. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. I will say that, the first thing I thought of was, well, what if they return Upstart or Nobleman or Reinforcements or Heavy or Premature or Creature Swap, something that they could play around. And I thought, well, you know what, let's not give them that option. Let's give them very minimal spells that they could choose from. So there's a lot of spells that ended up cycling through this deck over the years, but I ended up settling on just a few, and these options are Pot of Greed, Charity, Snatch Steal, and there's one other that I'll go over as well. Now, it's kind of hard for them to play around something like Pot of Greed or Charity unless they have something like Magic Jam or Judgment, Magic Drain, things that negate it. They can play around Snatch Steal, but a lot of times that does involve them not summoning a monster, which is good for you. And obviously things like MST, Dust Tornado, stuff like that can negate this. But this kind of makes it to where it backs your opponent into a corner. Whenever this is on the field, they're like, I guess I better not attack this turn. Or they say, well, I guess I'll run over it and just let my opponent net advantage. Or sometimes it makes them activate things like Ring of Destruction or Book of Moon or Sakuratsu, or it forces them to activate resources that they have on a 1300 attack monster when they should be saving those things for other problematic cards that could be in your deck. So that's the whole point of this card, is it makes your opponent lose advantage or gains you advantage. It makes them kind of play stupid in a sense, and so it's a really cool card. This card, whenever it hits the grave, you just place one of these spells on top of your deck, and then you get to activate it pretty much the next turn. Now, the other spell that I do play in this deck is called Bait Doll. Now, this card's an interesting card. What this does, here, I'll read it for you guys, and then I'll simplify it. Force the activation of one face-down trap card. If the timing of the activation of the trap card is incorrect, negate the activation and destroy it. If it is not a trap card, it is returned to its original position. After this card is activated, it is placed into the deck, not the graveyard, and then it's then shuffled. So now this is kind of like D-Spell for all my 2002 players out there. It kind of just forces a face down card, and you know, a lot of times it just ends up destroying. It's kind of like an MST, and then it gets shuffled back into the deck so that your opponent can't choose bait doll. It has to, your opponent has to choose one of these 3 cards. Now, I will say that there's only 4 spells in the deck. That's one of the reasons why we only play 1 Pixie Knight, is because I want to make sure that I have, you know, one of these in the grave. Now, mathematically, most of the time you will. Every once in a while, you'll end up seeing Pixie Knight before something else, and then you'll end up just having to kind of wait a little bit till you get a spell. But we only play 1 card in this deck. Now, while building this deck a long time ago, I was like, what can we do to kind of make this card a little more viable in the deck? So I was like, okay, let's add 3 copies of Shining Angel, because Shining Angel can special summon a 1500 or attack less attack in face up attack position, and Pixie Knight is definitely a target for that. And so I was like, let's do that. Let's try to in a lot of situations kamikaze these cards into my opponent and force them to top deck one of my spells. Now, this card is kind of like Magician of Faith, so to speak, because it gives you back a spell, but it is not a flip effect. So that being said, it plays a lot faster than something like Magician of Faith would. And if they run over a Magician of Faith, your Magician of Faith, you know, you lose a card, but you get one of these back. And same thing with Pixie Knight. Now, I will say that Shining Angel is one of those cards that you can just run into your opponent's Tribe, Breaker, Blade Knight. Man, there's a lot of different cards that you can just ram this into, get 2 or 3 copies into the grave, set up for your chaos plays, and then attack with Pixie Knight, and then just kind of, again, it makes your opponent kind of use resources on this that it didn't have to. It makes your opponent activate things like Sakuratsu Armor, Book of Moon, Ring of Destruction, Mirror Force, whatever on freaking Pixie Knight. that's the whole point of this deck. So, but with these, I was like, let's play some traps, because we're not going to be able to play a whole lot of spells, and let's play some traps. So I was like, let's play 2 copies of Raigeki Break, because this card is arguably one of the best traps in GOAT format, and spot removal at almost any time. And so I played 2 copies of this because I don't want to be, you know, too cloggy. And I was like, okay, what goes along with Raigeki Break? And then obviously I was like, okay, first thing I can think of is Serpent. Now, let's think turbo, because the whole deck is already kind of turbo. How can we get Serpent out quicker? Now, a lot of the ways that people do that is by Sangan. How can Sangan get out quicker? Tomato. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, we've got Lights and Darks, we've got Raigeki Breaks. This is kind of turning into a Chaos deck. So I ended up just taking that route with this deck. That being said, 1 BLS, 2 Sorks. I've said it in other profiles, and I'll say it again. I don't like 3 Sorks. You can play 3. I think 3 is good in decks that play like a bunch of discard outlets, meaning things like Card Destruction, and Morphine Jar, Cyber Jar, you know, things like that, because, you know, you cycle through the deck quicker. I like 2 and 1. It just it kind of makes it less cloggy, especially when you see these earlier on in the game. It kind of hurts. I will say that it's easier to utilize these a little bit more, just due to the fact that you can run your Tomatoes and Angels into your opponent's stuff and just kind of fill up your grave, deck thin. There's a lot of games earlier on I have 3 Tomatoes and 3 Angels within like the 2nd or 3rd turn, just because I decided to just go crazy. You do lose some life points, but you deck thin, and you're kind of set up for the rest of the game. So yeah. And then we play 3 copies of Thunder Dragon. This goes with the whole entire deck just tremendously, because you play the Chaos Monsters and you also play Raigeki Break. Now, I'm going to be super elementary for the people that maybe don't really know a whole lot about GOAT format. Maybe you're looking up GOAT format deck profiles on YouTube and you're like, okay, what's this? So I apologize for all the people that are already experts, but I'm going to talk elementary for a second. Thunder Dragon is really good because you get 2 copies of it from your deck to your hand when you pitch one to the grave, and that goes really good because it gets light in your grave, and you have discard outlet for something like Raigeki Break. It's pretty simple. Thunder Dragon is also really good because the deck thins by 2, protects your hand from things like Duo, Reaper, Thessalos. The list goes on and on. Then it gives you tribute fodder. If you have one of your opponent's monsters that you activated Snatch Steal on or whatever. One of the best cards in GOAT. I say it all the time, and I'll say it 1,000 more times. Now, I will say that we have some other techs in this deck that go along with the Tomatoes and Angels. We have 3 copies of Nidoria and 1 copy of DD Warrior Lady. Now, what you can do is, again, you can just run the Tomatoes and Angels into your opponent's problematic cards, whether it's like a Blade Knight, whether it's a Jinzo, whether it's a Chaos Monster in attack mode, whatever. You can just kind of ram them into them and special summon DD Warrior Lady or Nidoria, and it kind of makes it to where it's kind of a spot removal on attack, and it forces your opponent to activate, their back row, or it clears their monster. So it's just kind of 1-for-1. Now these cards are really good by themselves. They're all 1-for-1s regardless. Now if you set them and your opponent activates knock, that's a 1-for-1. If they run over them, it clears their monster as well. That's a 1-for-1. If you attack and then they have to activate the back row, that's a 1-for-1. So I like these cards a lot. I'm really a big fan of them. Obviously, the lights and darks, so it goes along with the strategy. Spirit Reaper is really good because you can go to it from Tomato. Not to mention you can search it with Sangan. Sangan can almost search the whole entire deck. So it's a really good defensive card and a really good offensive card. This is the if you're going second and your opponent has some back row and you open this, just make them go neg 1 or go 1-for-1. That's what this card is. Now we play 1 copy of Breaker because it's a dark, and this can also be a +1. Gets rid of that back row. There's not a whole lot of back row hate in this deck because we don't play things like heavy, we don't play things like MST, nothing like that. So we do like to play Breaker in this deck. That being said, we're going to move on to the traps. And on that note, we play 3 copies of Dust Tornado because, again, we don't play heavy, we don't play MST. Dust Tornado is also really good to hit in phase. Scapegoats, your opponent's snatch steals. We're playing a lot of big monsters in this deck and want to make sure that we are protecting these guys from things like snatch steal. 3 Dust Tornado is really good. This deck does a really good job at utilizing trap cards that make up for what we would be playing in spell form. That being said, we play some staples that go along with just this whole entire deck. Call of Haunted. I'm not a huge fan of Call of Haunted in a lot of Chaos decks, but this deck is really good because it's live at pretty much any time. Any card, any monster in your grave can be special summoned back by Call of Haunted. I would say like the worst targets are obviously things like maybe Breaker, Thunder Dragon, Serpent, but the rest of them are really good. So Call of Haunted's live at almost all times, starting almost from turn 1. Ring closes out a lot of games because there's a lot of high attack monsters in this deck, and Mirror Force because it's Mirror Force. It's too good not to play, especially in a deck where you're running traps. Now for draw power, we do play things like Jar of Greed and Reckless Greed. Reckless Greed, don't be reckless with this card, y'all. Make sure you're chaining it to things like MST, Heavy Storm, Dust Tornado, Breaker, Mobius, Trunade, things like that. If you need to see cards, sometimes you have to activate it. And if you need to, just be reckless with it, sometimes that happens. But if you can try to make it go, 1-for-1 with your opponent, try to make it to where you're not losing too much advantage, go with that. Next we play a few different techs. I like Magic Drain because this is kind of like a spell or trap negate without having to, go neg 1, or even though you're pitching a Thunder Dragon, it is neg 1, but you plus to begin with, so it kind of evens out. But Magic Drain is just one of those really good cards that I think kind of makes your opponent have to think, a little more than they usually do, and it kind of throws them off because it's a counter trap that you don't see very often. Now, rounding out the main deck, 2 Trap Dust Shoots. This card's really good, especially going first, and I love this card, especially in decks like this that are pretty aggressive. Going on to the side deck, you guys know me, and you know that I don't like to side a ton. I like to play cards that are really good in the main. I like to build a good main deck that's kind of versatile. But sometimes whenever we have decks like this, we really do need to side a little bit more. I'm not going to show you a full 15 side. I'm just going to kind of show you the cards that I go into the most. I will say that most of our side deck cards are trap cards, and it's very easy to side in this deck due to the fact that you're not taking out strategy cards for the most part, because you're just swapping out one trap for another trap, or traps, depending on what you're playing. 2 Magic Jammer. This usually gets put in replacement for the Raigeki breaks if my opponent is playing something like Reasoning Gate or another deck that is highly reliant on something like spells. We play 2 copies of Kaiku because it's a dark and it's a really good anti-meta card. And this deck is pushing anti-meta to begin with, so this card is just really good. Yeah, it's awesome. I love Kaiku. And then we play 3 copies of Mind Crush. Now, this card is really cool because, oh man, if your opponent activates something like Rhoda, I have to activate something like Tsukiyomi's in phase, Assure Priest in phase. This card's really good. I also like to just activate this card sometimes just for hand knowledge if I know that my opponent's adding like Thunder Dragon or Serpent, especially if it's like mid to late game and you're trying to close something out. depends on the match, but this card can be really good. It is a 1-for-1 trap, which this deck tries to plus where it can. So if you're just going 1-for-1 where you can, then I think that you should be in good shape. So that is the whole deck, guys. Let me know down below what other side options you have. I mean, I've sided in dozens and dozens of traps in this deck over the years, and I just found these ones to kind of be the best, and I don't really side a ton with this deck. But yeah, this is the deck, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Feel free to check it out and build it yourself, and yeah, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out all the links below. We'd appreciate that, and we'll see you guys later.